Good morning, everybody. And I appreciate all the people who are here today, and for Senator Grassley and all the other senators who are here. It was just a year ago today that 5 justices on the Supreme Court disregarded extensive findings of Congress and gutted the Voting Rights Act. I remember the feelings I had when these 5 people turned back everything that hundreds of members of Congress, both parties, both bodies, had worked so hard to get through. But I know that during the oral argument, Justice Scalia foreshadowed the majority's view of the law when he asserted that Congress supported the Voting Rights Act was based on the perpetuation of racial entitlement. I could not disagree more with Justice Scalia. And I'd suggest that he live in the real world and see what has happened in voting rights throughout this country. There is no right more fundamental to our existence as American citizens than the right to vote. Every eligible American is entitled to vote. No voter should have their vote denied, abridged, or infringed. In the Shelby County decision, the justices made clear that Congress could update the Voting Rights Act based on current conditions. And I do appreciate that, because whether we agree or disagree with the Supreme Court decision, I and all the rest of us will follow the Supreme Court decision. So I worked with Congressman Sensenbrenner, one of the most respected Republicans in the House of Representatives, as well as Congressman Conyers and Lewis, 2 other very respected Democrats in the House, to forge a bipartisan compromise to update and modernize the law. The bill was introduced 6 months ago on the eve of the weekend celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King's holiday. Now, at the time, I was hopeful that Senate Republicans would join me in supporting this important bill, as they had joined in supporting the original Voting Rights Act. But despite repeated efforts, I'm troubled to report that as of this hearing, not a single Senate Republican has agreed to support the effort. But I thank my fellow Senate Democrats on this committee who have all joined as co-sponsors, and I hope my fellow Republicans, especially those who supported the original Voting Rights Act, would join us. Unfortunately, the House Republican leadership have shown a similar lack of willingness to act on this critical bill. Not only do they refuse to vote on or mark up the bill, they refuse even to hold a hearing. This is unfortunate, because the Voting Rights Act has never been a partisan issue. I remember standing there with President George W. Bush when he signed it, the last update. And he and I and Republicans and Democrats, all of us, saying how happy we were that bill had gotten through. From its inception through several reauthorizations, it's always been a bipartisan effort. And it would be a travesty if the Voting Rights Act were to become partisan for the very first time in this nation's history. The Voting Rights Amendment Act updates and strengthens the foundation of the original law to combat both current and future discrimination. It is done in a way that's based on current conditions. A year after the Shelby County decision, it is clear that voters need more protection from racial discrimination in voting. As we approach a national election, it is not hard to see that attempts to deny and infringe upon the right to vote are only increasing. Just last week, the Brennan Center for Justice released a report called The State of Voting in 2014. According to this report, since 2010, 4 years ago, 22 states have passed new voting restrictions that make it more difficult to vote. Of the 11 states with the highest African-American turnout in 2008, 7 of those states have new restrictions in place. Of the 12 states with the largest Hispanic growth from 2000 to 2010, 9 of the 12 have passed laws to make it harder to vote. In addition, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights released a report last week entitled the persistent challenge of voting discrimination, which details nearly 150 voting rights violations just since 2000. And each of these cases impact thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of voters. And without objection, we'll place these reports in the record. These statistics and evidence in these reports reaffirm Chief Justice Roberts' acknowledgement that voting discrimination still exists. No one doubts that. So the Chief Justice said, voting discrimination still exists. No one doubts that. Then recognizing that, it's time for Congress to act. Next week marks the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act. Just as Congress came together 5 decades ago to enact the Civil Rights Act. And I remember that as a young law student at Georgetown. Democrats and Republicans must work together now to renew and to strengthen the Voting Rights Act. So I hope all Republicans and all Democrats will work with us to enact the meaningful protections in the Voting Rights Amendment Act. Senator Grassley.
Yeah.